What's up, you guys? I just finished a new book, and that book is New Spring by Robert Jordan. I'm finally finished with every book in the Wheel of Time. That's crazy. Yeah, first I really didn't believe that I had finished The Wheel of Time by Robert Jordan. I don't know, maybe like half a year ago. That's when I originally finished, but I have now finished the prequel, which is New Spring. Definitely thought it was a super cool book, but it had some problems, especially with the plot. The plot was the weakest of its, but it did have nice strengths. With the slog, didn't have the great character work, the interesting stuff happening in the characters. Here, interesting stuff happened to the characters. It's just the plot wasn't threaded as carefully. I mean, there's not a lot they can do with this concept now when you think about it, because the problem has already been solved in a future book. But that just leaves this book which introduces a problem but doesn't really resolve it. I mean, it's great because I can read the resolved problem now, but as a book, when you look at it, it just says, this is our problem. We spend the whole book trying to figure it out. Nothing happens. Even though I know what happens, the fact that nothing happens, there's very little payoff in this book, really kind of bothers me, and that's my main problem with this book. I mean, I kind of was hooked to the pages. It was not a boring book whatsoever, which I did say for some of the slog, it was pretty boring, so that was one of my criticisms for the slog. But here it wasn't boring. It was just kind of disappointing to see non-payoff. But it was a good book. I did like it. I'm going to give it a 3-star. Mainly because I love seeing Moiraine and Siuan now not perfect. Like, how they're portrayed in Wheel of Time is their perfection. Or especially Moiraine, because we get more of her. And yeah, so it's easy to see, like, her telling Rand the answers. She knows all the answers, which she does, to be fair. And to see her as an accepted, and now an Aes Sedai, a brand new Aes Sedai, it is really interesting to see how this character evolved, and I think it evolved very naturally. I love the Moiraine as a character. She is one of my favorite characters in the Wheel of Time, and so is Lan. Lan is definitely in my top 10 as well, because of the fact that he is just badass. And that's really cool to see, like, especially like him with his beginnings. I don't think we got enough of him in this book. Even though he kind of meets Moiraine towards the middle of this book, their paths kind of converge towards the middle. In my thought, I thought this would be a more Lan and Moiraine, like, before, like, after they got warded, but this was not. It was more of how they met, which was an interesting storyline. And it's very connected to the Wheel of Time story. It's super connected, but it just sets up a lot of problems that we knew were set up before. And a lot of cool things happen, like the prophecies, the predictions from the Amyrlin seat and the Aes Sedai next to the Amyrlin seat. I don't even know names. I can't names in the Wheel of Time other than the main characters are very hard for me to learn. But it's good. It's good to see that journey through them. I love the setup. If this is a good half of a perfect book, and that's what I'm gonna say. It's a good book. It's just it's not finished. I think the Wheel of Time completes it perfectly, but like, it's not a good concept because this is the footnotes, the previous couple hundred pages before Wheel of Time. Let's say if they wrote pages directly in front of Wheel of Time, this is the last major event to happen until the Wheel of Time events happen. And we see Moiraine's problem, Moiraine's get answered in the very next Wheel of Time book, Eye of the World, not next, but like the very next in chronological order. We see all her problems answered, or especially throughout the Wheel of Time series, and poof, knowing that happens is, like, knowing what's going to happen is kind of fun to see, like, kind of plan it out, get the timeline right in your head, and this provides so much detail with the Amyrlin seat in the White Tower. I love the detail in the White Tower. I'm never going to be bored of that. Had so much detail of the Aes Sedai test. There was one more Aes Sedai test, and that was Nynaeve's, which I said I really love the Aes Sedai test. This goes through very similar, but with Moiraine. Really, really cool. I liked that part. And I liked all of it. And a lot of people asked, where should I read New Spring? Where would I put it? And that's a question asked to a lot of people. And my answer would be mandatory 5. Like, obviously you hear it a lot, but there is an event that happens in 5 where this book wouldn't hit as hard if you haven't read number 5. So I would give it till number 5. For me, especially with the perspective of Lan, I would go all the way. But you don't have to, obviously. But, like, looking at Lan's story in this book and looking at Lan's story in A Memory of Light, that's why I love this book. Reading Lan's end and looking at Lan's beginning. And we never really got to look at Lan's beginning as much in The Wheel of Time. We did because it's not such a long series. There's a lot to explore. But here we get the most in-depth view at Lan's beginning. Same with Moraine. It's a very, very interesting story once you read it from that perspective. And that's a new way you can view this. That's different. But you will not have anything spoiled, or like you can read it after 5, and I'm not gonna stop you. I think it's a great idea because it is a good book, and yeah, there's a lot of good stuff in this book, so I would recommend you to read it, especially if you want more context while reading the series. If that's something you'd be interested in, go check it out. But if you really want it to have the most emotional impact, especially after 5, there's some emotional impact you get after 5, but finishing the series is a different feeling when reading this book. Or I haven't read it in the middle of the series. This is my first reading, and I read it after, and I really liked where I read it. It's also something that you can read before the series, which I don't think is a good idea. But also, if I had read this book without reading it before the series, I would be so disappointed in the fact that, like, none of the questions at the start were answered. It set up problems, it didn't resolve any of them. And that's a problem a lot of books have, especially prequels. If I was going to do a Wheel of Time prequel, if this was my ideal, like, let's make a Wheel of Time prequel, I definitely would set it back. Like, I would start history, like the Amyrlin seat, how that position was set up by Aes Sedai, or telling a story of, like, the Amyrlin seat as a child a long time ago, and just a history of Aes Sedai I would love to read. But I don't doubt that would ever come out. But that's something, a Wheel of Time story, I would definitely read. No question. And there's never, ever been any conclusion to the end of the Wheel of Time after the end. There has been quite a conclusion. That conclusion of A Memory of Light was epic. One of the best conclusions I've ever read. But there's never been anything after that. As a Wheel of Time fan, I would never support anything that happens after that. But some of the before stuff is what I would be really interested in. So that's what I want in a Wheel of Time prequel. I'm getting a little off topic. We're supposed to be reviewing this prequel. But yeah, it's a 3 out of 10. Solid book. I told you what I had problems with. So if that thing sounds interesting to you and you've read past book 5, check it out. This book is for you. But if you don't like the fact that, like, if you're really OCD and the fact that, like, there's a problem, we don't get the answer to it. Not in this book. We, like, the main series answers this, then you have a problem with that. I wouldn't read it, especially if you're not at book 5. Don't read it. If you haven't, don't read it as a standalone. Like, I don't want to read Wheel of Time, but I want to read this. Definitely wouldn't. I would start with Eye of the World, 110%. That was my review for New Spring by Robert Jordan, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace out.